Welcome to the Real Business Lifetime Lessons podcast, where Carolina business leaders get real about growth, grit, and leadership. I'm Josh Busbey, your All American agent with Lifetime Insurance Agency, and this is White Coat Conversations, in depth discussions with healthcare and wellness leaders who are making an impact across the Carolinas. My guest today is Jessie Ogienko, a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and CEO of Caladrius Therapy in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jessie is a trauma specialist, consultant, and trainer who has grown her practice to more than 22 providers in just 7 years. She's passionate about her heart-led, sustainable care for both clients and clinicians, and her mission is to provide that meaningful work and financial stability can coexist in mental health. Jessie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And as we talked before, mental health has a very special place in my heart. I've always been in therapy all my life for whether it's military, professional, or personal things that I've dealt with in my life, and I'm forever grateful for it. So let's dive into some mental health. You just celebrated 7 years with Caladrius Therapy. Congratulations.
Thank you. A get together over the weekend.
Well, that's incredible.
It was fun.
Well deserved. Looking back, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned about building and sustaining a practice?
That's a great question. It is a roller coaster. And I think something that we have dealt with because we've had fast growth is as soon as you get systems in place, they change. It's kind of like when you have a baby. As soon as you get used to one phase, you're on the next one.
Yeah,
So I think it's just
absolutely.
remembering to evolve and change and figure out new systems and make sure that everything is taken care of.
I can't imagine how proud of a moment it is when you celebrate milestones, when you open your first business. So not only it's a personal accomplishment, but you're helping more and more people in the community. So that's incredible.
Yeah, that's the hope, that we keep growing and keep expanding. And as long as it is still fun, I'll keep doing it, I guess.
Absolutely. You've been very open about your own journey with CPTSD and health challenges. How has that shaped the way you show up for your clients and your team?
I think it's made me more flexible and know that a lot of people need more flexibility in their work. And I also think that that lived experience is really valuable. It really helps you connect with clients as long as you've done your own work. I think if you have those experiences and you haven't done your own work, it can be harmful. But I really think that it's helped me do deep work and not burn out on it doing deep trauma work, because that is something
Hmm.
I hear a lot from providers, that they like helping people with severe trauma, but at the same time, it can be very difficult knowing how to help them while also maintaining enough distance that you don't burn out. So I think it's helped me with that. And it's really helped a lot of our staff, have chronic illness or things like that. And it's helped us figure out, because I've done it, figure out ways to help them not burn out as well.
Right. And I'm sure that's the biggest challenge personally when it comes to mental health and dealing with different clients in different situations is trying to compartmentalize and avoid that burnout and everything. So it sounds like you've got some good systems in place to help with that.
A lot of support, and we work on emotional boundaries as well, knowing that you're there for the clients and also you can't do it for them. You can't work harder than them, and you're more like their support system, but you're not the only support they should have. We should be working ourselves out of a job over time. And I think that's something
Hmm.
that we really want clients to be able to not be therapy dependent. We want them to fire us one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of knowing that and working from that framework of we want them to leave us one day.
Caladrius is built on heart-led sustainable care. What does that look like in action day to day?
So I think something that is less common, I'm not going to say we're the only practice doing it because we're not, but what is less common is taking private insurance and or private pay and or Medicaid. And we do all three. I think there's a lot of practices that only serve Medicaid, which was my first job out of grad school. And there's a lot of practices that only serve the self-pay population. So
Yeah.
you kind of get therapists sometimes that fall into one of two camps. We're working in community mental health. We really feel like we're making a difference, but we are burnt out, overworked, overscheduled. And then on the flip side, making very high hourly wages, seeing a lighter caseload, and feeling like that's the only way to be sustainable in the field. And I think a lot of it is me being able to understand all those systems and all those populations and serve all of them. But at the same time, it really helps us balance out for our clinicians because we can see Medicaid and help them while not burning out clinicians on only seeing Medicaid at the Medicaid rates. So we're really trying to spread it out so we can continue to do that deep, impactful work and at the same time make it sustainable because it is not sustainable to see only Medicaid for providers or for businesses.
Yeah. And I'm sure that when it comes to your clients, that accepting more than just one specific type of insurance gives them that peace of mind, and they don't have to be let down that they can't choose your practice because they don't have a certain type of insurance.
Yeah, and it's something we do too, is even if they're out of network, I mean, there are panels we've had to contracts with just because they haven't given us a raise in 7 years. We do auto network billing. We offer sliding scale with intern program. Also, our W-2s are each able to have one sliding scale spot each. And there's some pro bono work we do with second-year interns. So we really try to make it accessible even in those situations where they're out of network. And we also do the billing for the client. There's a lot of practices where they're like, we'll give you a super bill. My own therapist, no shade.
Yeah.
My kid's therapist, no shade, love her, but they give us super bills, so we have to submit to insurance. But for a lot of people, that's a huge barrier. So we do the billing for the client on the out-of-network side as well.
Is that a rare thing, or is that something more practices are getting into?
Some do it, but I would say it's much less common.
Okay.
Yeah.
You scaled to 22 providers. That's a major accomplishment. What were the biggest growing pains, and how did you overcome them?
I think people hired in looking for a certain thing in the beginning. And then when we became not that thing, we would have some turnover related to that. But we have someone that's been with us 5 years since the beginning. So some people loved that change, were excited for it. And some people are like, no, I wanted like a tiny group practice and this is no longer that, which is totally understandable and respectable. I will also say I started a business with a business partner that did not go well. It was a self-pay practice that really focused on holistic health, massage, all kinds of holistic care, meditation, yoga. I still believe in the idea, and I don't think the business failed, but the partnership definitely did. So Caladrius bought it out in 2021. That was a rough year.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Ultimately, we made it through. And the staff that wanted to stayed with Caladrius, and one of them is still here. So it worked out in the end, but it was very tough emotionally and financially as well.
Yeah. And on top of COVID and everything going on. Yeah.
It was a rough time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, also say we kept outgrowing spaces. So we moved 6 times in 5 years, and we ended up with 2 different locations. It was just we were constantly outgrowing space, needing new space, breaking leases. There's a lot of leases I'm still not quite sure how we ended up getting out of, but we did.
Yeah, but it was a good thing that you were constantly moving because you were constantly growing. You still keep a small caseload yourself. Why is that important to you?
Well, I think it's really important to maintain beginner's mind, which is kind of remembering what it feels like to be a beginner. I also think that keeping my skills sharp and remembering what it's like to work with clients day to day is really important for leading. My whole team is like, get rid of them, Jessie, charge. But at the same time, there's some people on my caseload that I've had on my caseload for years. Maybe they're in maintenance and I don't even see them that often, or maybe they, took a break and came back and they wanted to do more deep work, or they're in a different phase in their life. And it's also just hard. They're real relationships. It's hard to just end that. And I like seeing clients. Like I enjoy it a lot, but I am trying to limit, I specialize in like high crisis clients in the past. I'm really trying to limit the amount of crisis I take on, but it is that's the downside of specializing complex trauma. You tend to get a lot of crisis.
Yeah, I bet.
Hard.
Probably keeping a small caseload helps with the burnout process as well to alleviate that.
Well, it's interesting because now I'm on call for all of my clinicians. So I'm on call for them 24/7, 365, unless I'm on PTO. And then our clinical director is on call. So now I'm on call for a staff of, 20 something and my own clients. So I realized I've had to get it down to be able to support them when they need it.
Absolutely. You specialize in trauma therapy. What do people often misunderstand about trauma and healing?
It's a great question. I think 2 sides of the same coin, that trauma can heal. You can heal your brain from trauma. And at the same time, developmental trauma certain types of CPTSD, it's much more presents chronic illness. And it is something where I think you can really get your symptoms down to zero. I kind of say it's kind of like HIV. You can get it undetectable, but it's always kind of there. It makes
Hmm.
you more sensitive in the future to harm or PTSD in the future. But at the same time, there are a lot of traumas. There's a lot in your brain neurologically you can do to heal your brain and reduce those symptoms or even eliminate the PTSD altogether if you have more of a single episode or more of a simple presentation that can be
Hmm.
healed.
And when it comes to PTSD and CPTSD, is it pretty similar? Just the only difference is the age level?
No, actually. So developmental trauma and CPTSD are kind of going hand in hand, but you can have CPTSD even if you had a very healthy, normal, happy childhood.
Hmm.
So imagine you're in a car accident one day and you develop PTSD from that.
Hmm.
It's pretty understandable why you don't want to get in a car, right? I was
Yeah.
in a car, a bad thing happened. I'm having all these nightmare intrusive symptoms. That's PTSD. Okay, but imagine you were in a car accident every day of your life from the time you were a small child. You'd still get in the car every day. And some days it might just be a fender bender, and some days it might be a really deadly accident. But that is just your life. So if someone's like, oh, are you afraid of cars? You'd be like, no, like, it is
I'm
what it is.
used to it.
Yeah. And that is what developmental trauma and CPTSD can look like is their
Hmm.
body still absorbs all that stress and fear, but at the same time, they don't always recognize how much of what they deal with is because of it. And it was so normal for so long that they don't know any different. On the flip side, you can have CPTSD. We see it in veterans sometimes where it's maybe I had a happy, healthy, normal childhood. My brain developed normally, but maybe in basic training or survival skills training, I was
Hmm.
traumatized and I was actually deployed. I had multiple deployments, multiple traumas, many different traumas that the brain is going to say, okay, it's not just this one thing like cars that's scary, like the whole world is scary. People are
Yeah.
unsafe. And we get more of a CPTSD presentation.
Okay.
So it looks a little different. You also have
Yeah.
moral injury with soldiers often or military, which is slightly
Hmm.
different form of trauma and can be a little more difficult to heal and often presents more like CPTSD.
Okay. That's interesting because I never knew the exact differences between both of
CPTSD is more of like a systemic change to your brain versus like
them. Hmm.
PTSD is like, I have long-standing symptoms from this one
Yeah.
situation. In both
Okay.
cases, your brain is trying really hard to keep you safe and it's become oversensitive to your environment.
Gotcha. So you shared a powerful story about working with foster youth from age 11 to college. How do you measure success in a field where progress looks different for everyone?
Well, I would say the most simple answer is asking the client what they want and trying to hit that. But I will say with that child, I remember she's been in over 150 homes in foster care. Reactive attachment disorder, which is basically developmental trauma on steroids, where you can't form a healthy attachment to others. Like you've been let down and so many times, or maybe you never even had that attachment to begin with. And I just remember being in like yet another meeting about her changing homes and be like, if this kid just makes it to college, like we did it. Like that's all me and the
Absolutely.
guardian ad litem that we had. We were like, we just need to get her to college.
Yeah.
Because we knew she could thrive in the right environment, but she couldn't form an attachment. And it's very hard to be a child when you can't form an attachment like that and truly trust people.
100%.
But everyone's different. I also work with a lot of very high performers, people that are entrepreneurs, CEOs. And for them, maybe it's ironic that success, maybe it looks like they take time for themselves or they realize that they are not the success of their business or their motivation starts to come from a healthy place instead of a toxic place. It comes from pride and wanting to achieve versus fear of failure. So success can look very different on different people.
Absolutely. And I can't imagine being at such a young age and moving around that much. That girl's got incredible heart,
Yeah, she is one of the most resilient people I've ever met.
hands down. You've said clinicians shouldn't have to choose between meaningful work and a livable wage. What systems have you put in place to make that a reality for your team?
Yeah, so I would say most private practices are the 1099 model. And I do think there are ways to
Hmm.
make that approachable and sustainable for people. We do have still a little less than half. But what we did a couple of years ago, which I think is much more rare, is we put in a salary option with full benefits, unlimited PTO, And it's true unlimited. Like, we want them to take it when they need to take it. And productivity requirements assume that they take 4 weeks a year. So if at some point we have to change it, it'll be 4 weeks a year, roughly. So our hope is to not have to change it, but labor laws always be changing. That is something we did. And I think most places that do W-2 do hourly. And then it is hard for clinicians. I would say 25 is pretty standard caseload, 25 sessions a week, but that is not doable for every clinician. And some clinicians want to do closer to 30. But the reality is if you're doing hourly work, you might not qualify for benefits. And unless the practice owner just chooses to give part-time workers benefits, they don't always get them. We decided we're going to take the risk. We trust our business. We trust the clients, the referrals that we get, that we're going to start people at salary and just say, here's the productivity expectation. You can negotiate your salary up if you want to see more, and you can negotiate your salary down if you want to see less. So we allow them to do that. We really try to find a number that works for them. And then we do reviews every 6 months. So if they're killing productivity and knocking it out of the park, we'll bump them up on salary, and vice versa. If they're like, Jessie, I really, you know what? 25 is not for me. I really want to see 20. We do the math on that and we figure out what that might look like. We also have a ton of things that they can do that aren't seeing clients to hit their productivity, whether that's helping us create content, whether that's helping with interns, whether that's doing networking events or volunteering at community stuff and putting our name out there. So if they are in that place where they're close to burning out or they're stressed, we can find non-clinical things for them to do to still contribute to the team. And that's something I really haven't seen anywhere else. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's just not something I've seen.
Sounds to me like the dream job for a mental health professional.
I hope so. I mean, we have about 10% turnover, which is much lower than industry average. People do leave, and sometimes I see it coming and I'm like, yeah, I see why. But sometimes, yep, that one surprised me. I don't really know why they left. They seemed happy. Yeah. I also think, what is it now? 2 years is average for people to stay in a job. People just hop around.
Yeah. Which is wild, that statistic. And I'm sure that when you give them 4 weeks, that's probably the minimum that they should take vacation wise, because of how stressful and, avoid the burnout in this specific field.
Yeah.
Not encouraging your employees to do that, but.
And they also get holidays off for W-2s. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I think there's different ways to do it, because I've tried to experiment for myself. And I think there's something to be said for kind of working hard and then taking a really long break. But I also think there's something to be said for, okay, this feels good at the end of the week. I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel mentally out. Finding that number. And that's something we do a lot with younger clinicians, is like we do a lot of support and coaching and helping them figure out what that is. Because some people, they want to work 5 days and see 5 clients. Great. Some people actually will do better 3 days with the equivalent number of clients and just have 3 longer days and then have that huge weekend. Right. And then some people need a big break in the middle. So that's something we really push. Try out different ways of seeing clients and see what works the best for you. See how you feel at the end of the week. Be mindful about it. Because I actually do better when I kind of see a bunch back to back to back versus have a big break. It's hard for me to find something to do in that hour. I have to do that. There's nothing to do if you've ever been in that place. But some people need that.
I definitely have.
Yeah. It's like, but starting and focusing for 1 hour, I feel like isn't worth.
No, it's not. And everybody has to figure out what works best for them. And I'm sure that everybody starting out or younger into their career, they have absolutely no idea until it takes time and trial and error, probably.
Yeah.
You also train and consult with other therapists. Speaking of, what's the most common mistake you see new clinicians or practice owners make?
I will say, not having good emotional boundaries with clients is a big one I see. I will also say going into private practice too early, especially solo private practice, especially since COVID. It's a little bit of a hot take.
Yeah.
But I think that so many, and we've had people leave here in the past and go into private practice with 1 or 2 years experience. And it's not that I don't think they're good clinicians. It's not that I think they can't do it. It's more of you're missing out on so much. Not being on a team, learning from people who have been doing this 10, 15, 20 years, getting exposure to clients that aren't your ideal client. I think there's so much value in that. And that's something I see in the field that I think is regrettable, is that people are niching down, being like, I'm a specialist in this after 1 year going private
Right.
practice. And I just don't think it's the best for them. And I don't think it's the best for the client.
Mm-hmm. You see that a lot where people are turning to do their own practice or their own thing after a short period of time.
Yeah, and I think it's because the percentage that the practice takes, which standard in the field is 50% to 30%, I would say. And 30% is really, that's for the practice to take, so they take 70. That's really less and less common, and it should really only be for very advanced clinicians who need minimal support. I think you see it a lot in businesses that maybe haven't been around as long and don't know that it's not really sustainable to pay all your clinicians 70% when all of these things come up. In any case, the clinicians don't really see all the back end of where all the money goes. And I think they calculate in their head, well, I can afford rent, like I can afford an EHR and make a lot more money, but they're not realizing we have legal support on retainer, we have an accountant, we have all these things in place that protects them and helps them and makes the practice sustainable and functional. So I think it's really very financially driven for a lot of therapists, and I get the allure and the desire to do that. And at the same time, it's not that easy. And also now all the risk is on you, so it's something I see a lot.
For you personally, how do you balance running a business with protecting your own mental health?
Yeah, I have a very strict work schedule. I am Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I do not schedule outside that unless someone is suicidal. That would pretty much be the only exception to that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten very good at, when I'm done for the day, I'm done for the day. I don't work at home. I don't work on the weekends. I think a lot of people think I do, which is funny, but I'm a very much work smarter, not harder kind of person. If something's not working, we need to figure out a different way of doing it or a different system or revisit what the issue is.
Right.
So I would say that's a big one, is really just having very firm time boundaries. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at home,
Absolutely. And you got to have it, especially not only in the field that you're in, but also as a business owner as well. You got to learn how to compartmentalize and shut your professional brain off when it's time to do that. Do you see things like benefits, retirement planning, and finding Social Security as part of clinician wellness?
Yes, for sure. And we actually, beginning of this year, we took on HR Marvel, which is like a fractional HR company, and to add retirement planning to have better benefits for staff, because we had the things before. Well, we didn't have retirement planning, but we had benefits before: health insurance, dental, vision, life. And it's fun. A lot of the benefits packages for therapists are terrible. And we really wanted to offer a better offering. So now we're kind of competitive with some of the local hospitals, which I know because we've gotten some stuff from those hospitals, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's so important. I think therapists are definitely one of those groups of people that tend to not be very financially literate, unfortunately. And I know there were some faces after the retirement planning call this year. You guys really have to think about this. And it's hard in this economy. And it's hard because therapists, we don't make that much. Starting salaries were, 50,000. When I started, it was like 40,000. It's just not, it's hard to have a livable wage, but it gets there. And I think it's really important to tell people, plan for retirement, think about it, especially the contractor. Sometimes I can't give them tax advice, but at the same time, just because you get all that money, like you have to put some aside for taxes, you have to put some aside for retirement, make sure you're doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just wild to see that in today's age that even $100,000 is not what it used to be.
Right.
Not even close.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a misconception too. So I will say I'm married to someone who does very well. He works for EY, but at the same time, $100,000 is not something I've made for the last 7 years. Let's put it that way. There was 1 year, and that's on risk of business ownership. There was 1 year I made 30,000, and then, 50, 60, 70, I would say is more common.
Yeah. You got to make sure that your staff members are taken care of before you're.
Yes, 100%. So I think 100,000 isn't what it used to be. And two, everything has gone up, it seems, except therapist wages. I think we're the lowest paid healthcare professionals with master's degrees.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So I think that's something we're always trying to have conversations with people. You need to make more, and to make more, you need to see more clients. And how do we make it sustainable?
From your perspective, what would be an ideal support system look like for mental health professionals, both clinically and financially?
I think having that outside person outside the practice for us, we got a fractional HR company. I think that has been really helpful because they have someone else they can talk to about it. I think for those doing 1099 work, having a CPA or an accountant that they trust, or someone outside the practice that they trust, because owners shouldn't be giving tax advice. You're not allowed to give tax advice, and they're not unbiased. I mean, I truly care about my people, but we don't know that for every group practice owner. I think it's really important that people have people outside of work to talk to about those things, or that the workplace provides a resource for them, like an HR person or company or something, for them to truly explore their options so they really know all the options. Because I think that's another thing, is a lot of people may have options where they are, but they don't even know what those are.
Yeah, one of my boss Aubrey's favorite lines to say, but at the same time you have to say it, especially with dealing with our clients, you should totally consult with a CPA. We don't give tax advice, or we don't give legal advice. You've mentioned waiting. You've mentioned wanting to launch your own podcast. What conversations are you most excited to have when you do?
That's a great question. I haven't launched a podcast because I can't really settle on a primary mission. But I'm open to it. Like, I'm really interested in like psychoeducation with clients, telling them more, like CPTSD. I think there's a lot of misinformation. I think there was, I don't quote me on the number, but it was like 80-90% of content for psycho ed on social media is bad. It's fake. It's not real. Or it's like overgeneralized. You might have and you also might be a range of normal according to TikTok.
Right.
And no hate. Like, I think those creators are putting a lot of good info out, funny info, but a lot of it is for views and isn't actually real. And I think the podcast is a better format to put out that kind of information. I also would love to talk more to young therapists who are starting in the field of, okay, yes, you got to earn your stripes, but at the same time, you don't have to put up with crazy workplace environments. There's balance. Yeah. So a little bit of both. And then also a little bit of like telling my story. I don't think I talk enough about what I've been through. You're always trying to toe that line of not over disclosing, but also disclosing enough because your story is meaningful and other people can learn from it. So I think like a podcast could be a good format for that as well.
Absolutely. And it gives you, like for me with this podcast, because it took me a while to come up with the angle that I wanted to go with. And it's an opportunity for me to, of course, meet with other healthcare professionals and myself learn about different things. But also it's an opportunity for you or whoever I talk to educate my listeners and connect and just show them, especially when it comes to mental health, that you don't have to be stuck in that dark place. And there is help out there. There is resources out there. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel for whatever you're going through.
Yeah. And especially with trauma work, I think there's so much misinformation and misunderstandings about trauma work. And for instance, like I think one thing a lot of people don't know is sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. And that doesn't mean your therapist is doing a bad job. I use with my clients. I don't know if you ever watched The Stand or like any zombie movie where they have to go through the tunnel. There's always a jump scare in the middle of the tunnel, no matter what movie it is. Right. And that trauma works kind of like that. Like we're pulling all this stuff up to reprocess it and work on it. And your symptoms may actually get worse when you're in therapy. It doesn't mean your therapist is doing a bad job. In fact, they're probably doing a good job as long as they're containing it, helping you cope through it. But yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of gets worse before it gets better. Some of my clients have been with me longer. They're like, you enjoy this too much. I'm like, I don't want you to have pain. At the same time, like I know we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Looking ahead, what do you hope Caladrius and your own leadership will be known for in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think providing excellent evidence-based care and also providing training to other therapists that want to do the same.
Good way to put it.
I think that's something that's really important to us is we use a lot of evidence-based modalities. I mean, we do basic talk too, if that's what the client wants. But we really want people to know that there's really ways to heal, to overcome these symptoms, to get through it and not just cope with it for the rest of your life. And I think that's something we really want to be known for, is that we are really providing excellent high-level care.
For young clinicians and entrepreneurs listening, what advice would you give about building a business that grows without burning you out?
I would say if you want to own your own business, get leadership in someone else's business where you're not at risk if things go bad. Learn from someone else. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking to earlier, that people go too fast. Get a clinical director role, get a area director role, work as a program director, get experience supervising other staff, running a budget, dealing with upset clients. That's something that doesn't get talked about. Like if a client is upset with a staff, like I'm talking them through that. I am figuring out, do I need to talk them through that? Do I need to talk to the clinician? There's so much that goes into running a practice. Even if you're a solopreneur, you're still now responsible for budget. You're responsible for advertising. You're responsible for public relations, all the finance that goes into it, payroll, all of those things. So I would say really stay somewhere else longer than you think you need to and get that experience at someone else's business before you do it on your own.
Awesome. Well, Jessie, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about Caladrius Therapy?
Our website, clinicians.com, and we are most active on Instagram at Caladrius Therapy, and I am at Jessie Ogienko, LCSW. We also have a Facebook at Caladrius Therapy and LinkedIn.
We've talked about a little bit before. One of the reasons why I want to do this podcast is to connect with people and show them that there is help out there, especially with Caladrius Therapy. But what would you suggest to a listener who is maybe dealing with something like this in their life? What steps they could take to go, like you were saying, go down that actual tunnel?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest resource I give to clients is Psychology Today. It's a great resource. Open Path Collective is also a great resource if cost is a barrier. But I will say, depending on your state, because we have state licensures, I don't know if a lot of people know that, but you can go on Psych Today, put in your state, and then look for certain modalities. So for trauma, TFCBT, EMDR are great places to start. So finding a provider that has experience and specializes in trauma is a great place to start. And you can filter on Psych Today for that. I will say stay away from the tech platforms. Hot take. I'm not a fan. Find a private provider. And it can be hard to find a provider. And I think that's why a lot of people do go to the tech platforms. And at the same time, if they don't email you back, email another one. It's kind of like dating. Like it takes time to find the right person for you. And it's okay to have a few duds.
Absolutely. Well, Jessie, thank you so much for being on my podcast episode today. I've had a blast talking about all this, and I know our listeners will too.
And I hope that they enjoy it.
Thanks for listening to White Coat Conversations, part of the Real Business Lifetime Lessons podcast, hosted by Lifetime Insurance Agency. Be sure to subscribe so you'll catch more inspiring stories from healthcare and wellness leaders across the Carolinas. And if you're a Carolina resident who needs assistance with health, life, or Medicare insurance, please reach out. Our team would love to support you. Have a great week.